The Christian in Complete Armor by William Gurnall. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 17, and take the helmet of salvation. Chapter 4. Show how hope makes the Christian content with and faithful in the meanest place and lowest employment that God orders for him. Secondly, as hope raises the Christian spirit to attempt great exploits, so it makes him faithful in the meanest and lowest services that the providence of God calls him to. For the same providence lays out every one his work and calling, which sets bounds for their habitation on the earth. Some he sets on the high places of the earth and appoints them honorable employment. Others he pitches on lower ground and orders them in some obscure corner to employ themselves about work of an inferior nature all their life. And we need not be ashamed to do that work which the great God sets us about. The Italians truly say, "No man fouls his hands by exercising his own calling." Now, to encourage every Christian to be faithful in his particular calling and place, he hath made promises that are applicable to them all. Promises are like the beams of the sun. They shine as freely in at the window of the poor man's cottage as of the prince's palace. And these hope trades with, and these animate the Christian at his work. Indeed, we are no more faithful in our callings than we are influenced by faith and hope therein. Now observe, God lays his promise so that it may strengthen our hands and hearts against the chief discouragement that weakens them in their callings. The great discouragement of those high employments, ministry and magistrates, is the difficulty of the providence and the opposition they find from the angry world. These therefore are guarded and supported with such promises as may fortify their hearts against the force and fury with which the world comes forth to oppose them. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage. Joshua 1, 5 and 6. This promise will give to Israel's chief magistrate, and the minister's promise suits well with this, as having ordinarily the same difficulties, enemies, and discouragements. Go teach all nations, and lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20. Again, the temptation that usually haunts persons in low and ignoble callings is the meanest of them, which occasions discontent and envy in some, to see themselves on the floor and their brother preferred to more honorable services, and others dejection of spirit, as if they were like the eunuch, but dry trees, unprofitable, and brought to no glory to God, while others, by their more eminent places and callings, had the advantage of being highly serviceable to God in their generations. Now, to arm the Christian against this temptation and remove this discouragement, God hath annexed as great a reward in the promise to his faithfulness in the meanest employment as the most honorable is capable of. What is there more mean and despicable than the servant's employment? Yet no less than heaven itself is promised to them if faithful. Colossians 3:23. He is speaking to such, "Whatsoever ye do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, and not unto men, knowing of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ." Where, observe, first, what honor he puts on the poor servant's work. He serves the Lord Christ, yea, in the lowest piece of work that belongs to his office. His drudgery is divine service, as well as his praying and hearing, for he saith, "Whatever ye do." Again, observe the reward that is laid up for such, and that is as great as he shall receive who hath been faithful in ruling kingdoms. The reward of the inheritance, as if God had said, "Be not, O my child, out of love with thy homely work. Ere long thou shalt sit as high as he that sways scepters. Though your employment now be not the same with his, yet your acceptance is the same, and so shall your reward also." Thus we see, as we bestow more honorable honor on those members of our body which we think less honorable, so doth Christ with those members of his body which, by reason of their low place in the world, may be thought to be most despised. He puts an abundant honor upon them in his promise, And where hope is raised, the Christian cannot but take sweet satisfaction from the expectation thereof. The poor plowman that is a saint and plows in hope of reaping salvation is as well contented with his place in work as the courtier is with his. Think of this: when any of you have a servant to choose, if you would have your work faithfully and heartily done, employ such about it, if they can be had, as have a hope of salvation. This will not suffer them to wrong you, though they could. Their helmet will defend them from such temptations. Jacob was a true drudge for his master, Laban, by day and night, though he used him none of the best, in reducing and changing the wages so often. But Jacob served in hope and expected his reward with a better master than Laban, and this made him faithful to an unfaithful man. Joseph would not wrong his master, though at the request of his mistress he chose to suffer his unjust anger rather than accept her unchaste love. The evidence of this grace is a servant is better security for his faithfulness than a bond of 1,000 pounds. End of chapter 4. The Christian in complete armor. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 17a. And take the helmet of salvation. Chapter 5. Show us the mighty influence hope hath upon the Christian to support him in his afflictions, in particular what help it gives and how. Thirdly, this hope of salvation supports the soul in the greatest afflictions. The Christian's patience is, as it were, his back, on which he bears his burdens, and some afflictions are so heavy that he needs a broad one to carry them well. But if hope lay not the pillow of the promise between his back and his burden, the least cross will prove insupportable. Therefore it is called the patience of hope. 1 Thessalonians 1:3. There is a patience, I confess, and many know not a better, when men force themselves into a kind of quietness in their troubles, because they cannot help it, and there is no hope. This I may call a desperate patience, and it may do them some service for a while, but for a while. If despair were a good cure for troubles, the damned would have more ease, for they have despair enough, if that would help them. There is another patience also very common in the world, and that is a dull, stupid patience, which, like Nabal's mirth, lasts no longer than they are drunk with ignorancy. For they are no sooner come to understand the true state they are in, but their hearts die within them. But the patience of hope which we are now treating of is a sober grace, and abides as long as hope lasts. When hope is lively and active, then it floats, yea, even dances on the waters of affliction, as a sound ship doth in a tempestuous sea. But when hope springs a leak, then the billows break into the Christian's bosom, and he sinks apace, till hope, with much labor at the pump of the promise, clears the soul again. This was David's case. Psalms chapter 69, verse 1. Save me, O God, for the waters are come in into my soul. What means he by coming unto his soul? Surely no other than this, that they oppressed his spirit, and as it were, sewed into his very conscience, raising fears and perplexities there by reason of his sins, which at present put his faith and hope in some disorder, so that he cannot for a while see to the comfortable end of his affliction, but was as one under water, covered with his fears, as appears by what follows. Verse 2. I sink in deep mire, where there is no standing. He compares himself to one in a quagmire, that can feel no firm ground to bear him up, and observe whence his trouble rose, and whence the waters made their entrance. Verse 5. O God, thou knowest my foolishness, and my sins are not hid from thee. This holy man lay under some fresh guilt, and this made him so uncomfortable under his affliction, because he saw his sin in the face of that, and tasted some displeasure from God for it in his outward trouble, which made it so bitter in the going down, and therefore, when once he had humbled himself by confessing his sin, and was able to see the coast clear between heaven and him, so as to believe the pardon of his sin and hope for good news from God again, he then returned to his sweet temper and sings in the same affliction where before he sunk. Section 1. But more particularly I shall show what powerful influence hope hath on the Christian in affliction, and how. First, it stills and silences him under affliction. It keeps the king's peace in his heart, which else would soon be in an uproar. A hopeless soul is clamorous, one while it chargeth God, another while it reviles his instruments. It cannot long rest, and no wonder when hope is not there. Hope hath a rare art in stilling a forward spirit, when nothing else can, as the mother can make the crying child quiet by laying it to the breast when the rod makes it cry worst. This way David took and found it effectual, when his soul was unquiet, by reason of his present affliction. He lays it to the breast of the promise. Why art thou cast down, O my soul, and why art thou disquieted in me? Hope thou in God? Psalms chapter 42, verse 5. And here his soul sweetly sleeps, as the child with the breast in his mouth, and that this was his usual way, we may think by the frequent instances we find. Thrice we find him taking his course in two Psalms, Psalms 42 and Psalms 43. When Aaron and Miriam were so uncivil with Moses, and used him so ill in their foul language, no doubt it was a heavy affliction to the spirit of that holy man, an aggravation of his sorrow to consider out of whose bow those sharp arrows came. Yet it is said Moses held his peace, waiting for God to clear his innocency, and his patience made God, no doubt, the more angry. To see this meek man wronged, who does trust him with the vindication of his name, and therefore with great speed he wiped off the dirt which they had thrown on him before it could prejudice his good name in the thoughts of others. Indeed, this waiting on God for deliverance in an afflicted state consists much in a holy silence. Psalms 62, verse 1. Truly my soul waiteth upon God. From him cometh salvation. Or, as the Hebrew, my soul is silent. It is a great mercy in an affliction to have our bodily senses so as not to lie raving, but still and quiet, much more to have the heart so silent and patient. We find the heart is still soon heated into a distemper as the head. Now what the sponge is to the cannon when hot with often shooting, hope is to the soul in multiplied affliction. It cools the spirit and meekens it, so that it doth not break out into distempered thoughts or words against God. Secondly, this hope fills the afflicted soul with such inward joy and consolation that it can laugh while tears are in the eye, and sigh and sing all in a breath. It is called the rejoicing of hope. Hebrews 3:6. And hope never affords more joy than in affliction. It is in a watery cloud that the sun paints, and those curious colors in the rainbow. Rejoice in hope of the glory of God, and not only so, but we glory in tribulation. Romans 5:3. Glorying is rejoicing in a ravishment, when it is so great that it cannot contain itself within the Christian's own breast, but comes forth in some outward expression, and lets others know what a feast it sets at. The springs of comfort lie high indeed when the Christian's joy pours out to the mouth, and all this joy with which the suffering saint is entertained is sent in by hope at the cost of Christ, who hath provided such unspeakable glory for them in heaven, as will not suffer them to bemoan themselves for those tribulations which befall them on the way to it. Hope breaks the alabaster box of the promise over the Christian's head, and so diffuses the consolations thereof abroad, which like a precious ointment hath a virtue to accelerate and refresh the spirit, so to heal the wounds and remove the smart, which the Christian's poor heart may feel from its affliction. According to the Apostle, chapter 5, hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in his hearts. There are two graces which Christ uses above any other to fill the soul with joy, faith and hope, because these two fetch all their joy, wine of joy, without door. Faith tells the soul what Christ hath done for it, and so comforts it. Hope revives the soul with the news of what Christ will do. Both draw at one tap, Christ and his promise. Whereas the other graces present the soul with its own inherent excellences, what it doth and suffers for him, rather than what he does and suffers for them, so that it were neither honorable for Christ nor safe for the saint to draw his joy from this vessel. Not honorable to Christ. This were the way to have the king's crown set on the subject head, and cry Hosanna to the grace of Christ in us, which is due only to the mercy of God to us, for thither we will carry our praises, whence we have our joy, and therefore upon our allegiances we are only to rejoice in Christ Jesus and have no confidence in the flesh. Philippians 3:3. And it would be more safe for us than honorable for him, because of the instability of our hearts and constant actings of our graces, which are as often ebbing as flowing. And so our joy could not be constant, because our graces are not. But as these springs lie high or low, or would this rise and fall, yea, we were sure to drink more water than wine, often want joy than have it. Whereas now the Christian's cup need never be emptied, because he draws his wine from an undrainable fountain that never sends any poor soul away ashamed, as the brook of our inherent grace would do. Section 2. Question. But whence hath hope this virtue? Or what are the ingredients of hope's cordial, then thus accelerates the soul's spirit in affliction? Answer. First, hope brings certain news of a happy issue, that shall shortly close up all the wounds made by his present sufferings. When God comes to save his afflicted servants, though he may come sooner than they hoped or looked for him, yet he doth not come unlooked for. Salvation is what they calculate upon. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace, not evil, to give you an expected end, that is, an end suitable to the hopes and expectations taken up by you. Hope is a praying grace. It is able to look beyond the exterior transactions of providence. It can, by the help of the promise, peep into the very bosom of God and read what thoughts and purposes are written there concerning the Christian's particular state, and that it imparts to him, bidding him not to be at all troubled to hear God speaking roughly to him in the language of his providence. For, saith Hope, I can assure thee, he means thee well. Whatever he saith that sounds otherwise, for as the law, which came hundreds of years after the promise made to Abraham, could not disannul it, so neither can any intervening afflictions make void these thoughts and counsels of love, which so long before have been set upon his heart for thy salvation. Now such a one must needs have a great advantage above others for the pacifying and satisfying his spirit concerning the present proceedings of God towards him, because though the actings of God upon the outward stage of providence be now sad and grievous, yet he is acquainted with heaven's plot therein, and is admitted as it were into the attiring room of his secret council, where he sees garments of salvation preparing, in which he shall at last be clad and come forth with joy. The traveler, when taken in a storm, can stand patiently under a tree while it rains, because he hopes it is but a shower, and sees it clear up in one part of the heavens, while it is dark in another. Providence is never so dark and cloudy, but a hope can see fair weather coming from the promise. When these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Luke 21:28. And that is as black a day as can come. When the Christian's affairs are most disconsolate, he may soon meet with a happy change. The joy of that blessed day comes in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. We shall be changed. 1 Corinthians 15:52. In one moment sick and sad, in the next well and glad, never to know more what groans and terrors mean. Now clad with the rags of mortal flesh, made miserable with 1,000 troubles that attend it, in the twinkling of an eye arrayed with the robes of immortality, enriched with 1,000 times more glory than its sun itself wears in that garment or light which now dazzles our eyes. It is but for a moment, said a holy martyr in his fellow sufferers in the fire with him, and our pain and sorrow is all over. Who can wonder to see a saint cheerful in his affliction, that knows what good news he expects to hear from heaven, and how soon he knows not? You have heard of the weapon salve, that cures wounds at a distance, such a salve as hope. The saints' hope is laid up in heaven, and yet it heals all the wounds which they receive on earth. But this is not all, for as hope prophesies well concerning the happy end of the Christian's afflictions, so it assures him he shall be well attended while he lies under them. If Christ sends his disciples to sea, he means to be with them when they most need his company. The child that is well may be left a while by the mother, but the sick one she will by no means stir from. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2. You know what God said to Moses when he was sick of his employment and made so many excuses from his own inability and all that he might have leave to lay down his commission. Go, saith God, Exodus chapter 4, verse 12. I will be thy mouth and teach thee what thou shalt say. And again, verse 14. Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well, and also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee. Thus God animated him to like that hard providence which he was called to. Methinks I hear hope as God's messenger, speaking from the same sort of the drooping soul, oppressed with the thoughts of some great affliction, and ready to conclude he shall never be able to stem so rough a tide, bear up and cheerfully lift up his head above such surging waves. Go, O my soul, saith hope, for thy God will be with thee, and thou shalt suffer at his charge. Is not Christ thy brother? Yet is he not thy husband? He that thinketh can tell how to suffer, who is brought up to the trade from the cradle to the cross. Behold, even he comes forth to meet thee, glad to see thy face, and willing to impart some of his suffering skill upon thee. That man indeed must needs carry a heavy heart to prison, who knows neither how he can be maintained there nor delivered thence, but hope eases the heart of both these. Secondly, hope assures the Christian not only of the certainty of salvation coming, but also the transcendency of his salvation to be such as the sorrow of his present sufferings bears no proportion to the joy of that. This kept the primitive Christians from swooning while their enemies let out their blood. They had the scent of this hope to accelerate their spirits, for which cause we faint not. But though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. 2 Corinthians 4:16. Is not this strange, that their spirit and courage should increase with the losing of their blood? For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Verse 17. Behold here the difference between hopes of heaven and hopes of the world. These latter are fanciful and slighty, seem great in hope, but prove nothing in hand, like Eve's apple, fair to look on, but sour in the juice and bad of nourishment in the eating. It were well if men could in their worldly hopes come but to the unjust steward's reckoning, and for 100 happiness they promise themselves from the enjoyments they pursue, find but 50 at last paid them. Alas, they must look to come to so good a market that have to do with the creature, which will certainly put them to greater disappointments. They may bless themselves if they please for a while in their hopes, as the husbandman sometimes does in his goodly show, that he hath of corn standing upon his ground. But by that time they have reaped their crop, and thrust out their hopes. they will find little besides straw and chaff, emptiness and vanity, left them a poor return, God knows, to pay them for the expense of their time and strength which they have laid out upon them, much less suitable to recompense the loss he is to put to in his conscience. For there are few who are greedy hunters after the world's enjoyments, that do drive their worldly trade without running in debt to their consciences. And I am sure he buys gold too dear, that pays the peace of their conscience for the purchase. But heaven is had cheap, though he be with the loss of all our carnal interests, even life itself. Who will grudge to part with the lease of the low-rented farm, in which he also hath but a few days left before it expires? And such our temporal life is, for the perpetuity of such an inheritance as is to be had with the saints in light. This hath ever made the faithful servants of God carry their lives in their hands, willing to lay them down, while they look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Thirdly, as hope assures the soul of the certainty and transcendency of heaven's salvation, so also the necessity of subservience that his afflictions have towards his obtaining their salvation. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? Luke chapter 24, verse 26. As if Christ had said, What reason have you so to mourn, and take on for your master's death, as if all your hopes were now lost? Ought he not to suffer? What was any other way that he could get home and take possession of his glory that waited for him in heaven? And if you do not grudge him his preferment, never be so inordinately troubled to see him onwards to it, though through the merry lane of suffering. And truly the saint's way to salvation lies in the same road. Romans 8:17. If so be that we suffer for him, that we may be also glorified together. Only with this advantage, that his going before hath beaten it plain, so that now it may be forged, which but for him hath been utterly impassable to us. Afflictions understood with this motion, that they are as necessary for our wayfarage to glory as water is to carry the ship to a port, which may as soon sail without water, as a saint laid in heaven without the subservience of afflictions. This, well understood, would reconcile the greatest afflictions to our thoughts, and make us delight to walk in their company. This knowledge, Parisciensis, calls one of the seven beams of divine knowledge, for the want of which we call good evil, and evil good. Thank God blesses us when we are in the sunshine of prosperity, and curses when our condition is overcast with a few clouds of adversity. But hope hath an eye that can see heaven in a cloudy day, and an anchor that cannot find firm land under the weight of water to hold by. It can expect good out of evil. The Jews open their windows when it thunders and lightnings, expecting, they say, their Messiah to come at such a time to them. I am sure hope opens her window widest in this day of storm and tempest. Zephaniah 3:12. I will leave in the midst of thee an afflicted and poor people, and they shall trust in the Lord. And Micah 7:7. Therefore will I look unto the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. See what strong hope holds, anchors, takes, as it is remarkable, if you observe the place, because all things were at so desperate a pass in the church affairs. Therefore says the same, I will look, I will wait. Indeed, God does not take the axe into his hand to make chips. His people, when he is hewing them and the axe goes deepest, they may expect some beautiful piece at the end of the work. It is a sweet meditation, Parisciensis, hath upon Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for good to them that love God. Oh, where my soul shouldst be more satisfied, free of care and fear, that when thou art amongst thy fellow laborers, and those that come to help thee to obtain thy so much desired salvation, which thy afflictions do, they work together with ordinances and the other providential detailings of God for your good, yea, thy chief good, and thou couldst as ill spare their help as any other means which God appoints thee. Should one find, on raising in the morning, some on his housetop tearing off his tiles with the axe and hammers, taking down the roof, he might at first be amazed and troubled at the sight, yea, think they are enemies come to do him mischief. But when he understands they are workmen sent by his Father to mend his house and make it better, which cannot be done without taking some of it down, he is satisfied to endure the present trouble. Yea, thankful to his Father for the care and cost he bestows on him. The hope of what advantage will come to their work makes him very willing to dwell a while in the midst of ruins and rubbish of his old house. I do not wonder to see the hopeless souls so impatient in their sufferings, sometimes even to distraction. Alas, they fear presently, and have reason to do so, that they come to pull all their worldly joys and comforts down about their ears, which gone, what alas, have they left to comfort them who can look for nothing but hell in another world? But the believer's heart is eased of all this, because assured of the promise that they are sent of a better errand to him from his heavenly Father, who intends him no hurt but good, even to build the ruinous frame of his soul into a glorious temple at last. And these afflictions come along other means, to have a hand in the work, and this satisfies him, so that he can say, Lord, cut and hew me how thou pleasest, that at last I may be polished and framed according to the plan which love hath thrown into thy heart for me. Though some ignorant man would think his clothes spoiled when bemoaned with fuller earth or soap, yet one that knows the cleansing nature of them will not be afraid to have them so used. End of chapter 6. The Christian in Complete Armor by William Gurnall. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 17. Chapter 6. Wherein is shown that God stays long before he performs some promises, and that it is hope's office then to keep the Christian in a waiting posture. The fourth and last office of hope propounded is to quiet and compose the heart when the good things of the promise, so much longed for by the Christian, stay long before they are performed. Patience, I told you, is the back out which the Christian's burdens are carried, and hope the pillow between the back and the burden to make it sit easy. Now patience hath two shoulders, one to bear the present evil, and another to forbear the future good promised. And as hope makes the burden of the present evil of the cross light, so it makes the longest stay of the future good promised short. Whereas without this the creature could have neither strength to bear the one, nor patience to wait for the other. Lamentations 3:18. And I said, My strength and my hope is perished from the Lord. Implying thus much, that where there is no hope, there is no strength. The soul's comfort soon gives up the ghost where all hope fails. God undertook for Israel's protection and provision in the wilderness, but when their dough was spent and their store emptied, which they brought out of Egypt, they fall foul with God and Moses. And why? But because their hope was spent as soon as their dough. Moses ascends the mount, and is but a few days out of their sight, and in all haste they must have a golden calf. And why? Because they never hope to see him more. This is the reason why God hath so few servants that will remain faithful to him, because he makes them wait for what he means to give, and they are impatient and cannot stay. You know what Naomi said to her daughter Ruth 1:12-3. If I should have a husband and should also bear sons, would you tarry for them till they are grown? Would you stay for them from having husbands? The promise hath salvation in its womb. But will a soul without heavenly hope stay till the promise ripens and this happiness be grown up? No, surely they will rather make some match with the beggarly creature, or any base lust which will pay them in some pleasure at present, than wait so long, though it be for heaven itself. Thus as Tamar played the trumpet, because the husband promised her was not given her as soon as she desired. Genesis 38. So it is the undoing of many souls, because the comfort, joy, and bliss of the promise is withheld at present, and they are made to wait for their reward, because they throw themselves into the embraces of their adulterous world. Emos has forsaken me, having loved this present world. 2 Timothy 4:10. The soul only that hath this divine hope will be found patiently to wait for the good of the promise. Section 1. God often stays long before he fulfills his promise to his people. The promise contains the matter of all our hopes, called, therefore, the hope of the promise. To hope without a promise is to claim a debt that never was owing. Now the good things of the promise are not paid down presently. Indeed, then, there would not be such need of promises. What need of a bond where the money is paid down? God promised Abraham a son, but he stayed many years for him after the bond of the promise was given. He promised Canaan to him and his seed, yet hundreds of years interposed between the promise and the performance. Esau was spread into a kingdom before the heirs of the promise had their inheritance, yea, all the patriarchs who were the third generation after. Abraham died and received not the promise. Hebrews 11:13. Simeon had a promise that he should not see death till he had seen the Lord's Christ. Luke 2:26. But this was not performed till he had one foot in the grave. In a word, those promises are the portion of all the saints and may be claimed by one as well as another. Their date is set in the book of God's decree, when to be paid, some sooner, some later, but not expressed in the promise. He hath engaged to answer the prayers of the people and fulfill the desires of those that fear him. Psalms 145, verse 19. But it proves a long voyage sometimes before the praying saint hath the return of his adventure. There comes often a long and sharp winter between the sowing time of prayer and the reaping. He hears us, indeed, as soon as we pray, but we often do not hear of him so soon. Prayers are not long on their journey to heaven, but long coming thence in a full answer. Christ at this day in heaven hath not a full answer to some of those prayers which he put upon earth. Therefore he is said to expect till his enemies be made his footstool. Hebrews 10:13. Promises we have for the subduing sin and Satan under our feet. Yet we find these enemies still stalking within us, and many a sad scuffle we have with them before they are rooted out of our hearts, and so of others. We may find sometimes the Christian as great in error as he is to joy and comfort, hardly able to show a penny of this heavenly treasure in his purse. And for want of well pondering this one cause, poor souls are often led into temptation, even to the question their saintship. Such promises are the saints' portion, saith one, but I cannot find them performed to me. Therefore I am not a saint. Many a prayer I have sent to heaven, but I hear no news of them. The saints are conquerors over their lusts, but I am often foiled and worsened by mine. There is a heaven of comfort in the promise, but I am, as it were, in the belly of hell, swallowed up with fears and terrors. Such are the reasonings of poor souls in the distress of their spirits, whereas all this trouble they put themselves to might be prevented, if they had faith to believe this one principle of undoubted truth, that God performs not his promises all at once, and what they want in hand they may see on the way coming to them. Section 2. When God stays long before he makes payment of the promise, then it is the believer's duty to wait for it. Though it tarry, wait for it. Habakkuk 2:3. He is speaking there of the good of the promise which God intended to perform in the appointed time, because it might tarry longer than their hasty hearts would. He bids them wait for it, as one that promises to come to a friend's house sends him word to sit up for him, and though he tarry later than ordinary, he will come at last. What? Wait when we have stayed so long, and no sight of God's coming after his prayer, and that sermon, so many long looks given at the window of his ordinances and providences, and no tidings to be heard of his approach in mercy and comfort to my soul, and after this still I am bid to wait? This is hard work. True, to flesh and blood it is, yea, weak faith is often out of breath and prone to sit down or turn back when it hath gone to meet God in the returns of his mercy and misses him, and therefore the apostle ushers in this duty with an affectionate prayer, 2 Thessalonians 3:5. The Lord direct your hearts into the love of God and to the patient waiting for Christ. He hath laid down a strong ground of consolation for them in the preceding chapter, in that they were chosen to salvation and called by the gospel to the obtaining of the glory of our Lord Jesus Christ, verse 13 and 14, and assured them that God, who is faithful, would establish them and keep them from evil, verse 3. He means they should not miscarry and at last fall short of the glory promised. By being sensible how difficult a work it was for them, amidst their own present weaknesses, the hypocrisies of others, and the assaults of Satan upon themselves, to hold fast the assurance of their hope unto the end, he turns himself from them to speak to God for them. The Lord direct your hearts, as if he had said, it is a way you will never find, a work you will never be able to do of yourselves, thus to wait patiently till Christ comes and bring the full reward of the promise with him. The Lord therefore direct your hearts into it. Moses therefore, he ascended the mount, had a fear and jealousy of what afterwards proved too true, that the Israelites' unbelieving hearts would not have the patience to wait for his return, when he should stay some while with God out of their sight, to prevent which he gave express command before he went up, that they should tarry there for him. Exodus 24 verse 14. Indeed, a duty more contrary to our proud hearts than this of waiting quietly and silently on God, I know not. We can make the great God bear our misconduct and run after us before we do what he commands. But if the promise comes not galloping full speed to us, we think it never will be with us. But why doth God, when he hath made a promise, make his people stay so long? I shall answer this question by asking another. Why doth God make any promise at all to his creatures? This may be well asked, considering how free God was from owing any such kindness to his creature, till, by the mere good pleasure of his will, he put himself into the bonds and made himself by his promise a debtor to his elect. And this proves the former question to be impertinent and overbold, as if some rich man should make a poor beggar that is a stranger to him his heir, and when he tells him this, he should ask, but why must I stay so long for it? Truly any time is too soon for him to receive a mercy from God, who thinks God's time is in sending it too late. This hasty spirit is as grievous to God as his stay can be with us. And no wonder God takes it so hideously, if we consider the bitter root that bears it. First, it proceeds from his selfishness of spirit, whereby we prefer our own content and satisfaction before the glory of God, and this becomes not a gracious soul. Our comfort flows in by the performancy of the promise, but the revenue of God's honor is paid unto him by our humble waiting on him in the interval between the promise and the performancy, and is the main end why he forbears the paying it hastily. Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and God surely may make us wait before the promise is given to our embraces by its full accomplishment. Ye have need of patience, that after ye have done the will of God, ye might receive the promise. Hebrews 10:36. It is very fit the master should dine before the man, if we like not a servant who thinks much of staying so long from his meal as is required, how much more must God dislike the rudeness of our impatient spirits, that would have our turn served in the comfort of the promise before he hath the honor of our waiting on him. Secondly, it proceeds from deep ingratitude, and this is a sin odious to God and man. They soon forget his works, and waited not for his counsel. Psalms 106 verse 13. God was not behindhand with his people. It was not so long since he had given them an experiment of his power and trust. He had but newly lent them his hand and led them dry-shod through a sea with which they seemed to be much confirmed in their faith and enlarged in their acknowledgment. Verse 12. Then believed they his words, they sang his praises. One would have thought God's credit would now have gone for a great sum with them ever after, but it proved nothing so. They dare not trust God with so much as their bill of fare, what they shall eat and drink, and therefore it is said, they waited not for his counsel, they lusted exceedingly in the wilderness. That is, they prevented the wisdom and providence of God, which would have provided well for them, if they could but have stayed. And why all this haste? They forgot his works. They had lost the thankful scene of what was past, and therefore could not wait for them what was to come. Section 3. Hope will enable the soul to wait when the promise stays longest. It is the very nature of hope to do so. Lamentations 3:26. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. Hope groans when the mercy promise cometh not, but does not grumble. Hope's groans are from the Spirit, sighed out to God in prayer. Romans 8:26. And these lighten the soul of its burden of fear and solicitous care, whereas the groans of a hopeless soul are vented in discontented passions against God. And these are like a loud wind to a fire that makes it rage more. Jeremiah 26 verse 16. They shall drink and be moved and be mad because of the sword which I shall send among them. It is spoken of the enemy of God and his people. God had prepared them a draught, which should have strange effects. They should be moved. As a man whose brains are disturbed with strong drink is restless, yea, is mad. As some when they are drunk quarrel with every one they meet. So should their hearts be filled with rage, even against God himself, who runs his sword into their sides, because they have no hope to look for any healing of their wounds at his hand. But now where there is hope, the heart is soon pacified. Hope is the handkerchief that God puts into his people's hands, so to wipe the tears of their eyes, which their present troubles and long stay of expected mercies draw from them. Jeremiah 31 verse 16 and 17. Refrain thy voice from weeping and thine eyes from tears, for thy work shall be rewarded, saith the Lord, and they shall come again from the land of the enemy, and there is hope in the end. This, with some other comfortable promises which God gave to this prophet in a vision, filled their heart with joy, that he was as much recruited and comforted as a sick and weary man is after a night of sweet sleep. Verse 26. Upon this I awaked, and my sleep was sweet unto me. End of chapter 6, having been read by Peter John Paresis.